Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is supported by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, Telecommunications Access Minnesota, and Nisswa Tax Service. Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Across from City Hall in Nisswa and online at nisswatax.com.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lakeland Currents, where we're coming to you this evening live from Brainerd. And if you're watching us, hopefully you're home safe and warm in your house, because the weather hasn't been very well this evening. This program this evening is about Main Street, revitalizing Main Street. It's hard to imagine that there isn't any community in the state of Minnesota that over the past 25 or 30 years that hasn't been impacted by either regional shopping centers or the large box stores that have moved into communities and often developed on the outside of what we consider Main Street. Annie Cook takes a look at what is happening in Crosby as they are looking at doing a project that will hopefully revitalize Main Street.
It's a common story in rural Minnesota, a once prosperous town fallen into disrepair.
Everyone talks about how things are closing, tough times.
In its 100th year, the town of Crosby is not immune to economic hardships.
We're always looking for new businesses in this economic times. I think we end up losing more businesses than we gain.
This area is really economically depressed. We've lost a lot of businesses.
But Crosby has hope in the form of a state-of-the-art mountain bike trail. Boarded up windows and empty stores are a common theme along Crosby's Main Street. But business owners hope the trails coming in this summer will bring this once booming mining town back to its glory days.
With the new mountain bike trails coming in, that's just going to make a world of difference for not only my store, but the whole Cuyuna range.
We're going to have one of the biggest mountain biking trail systems in the nation, so it's going to be very exciting.
The city will not just house the trails, but also serve as a training station for the International Mountain Bike Association.
They're going to have training sessions and people coming from around the nation to our area to learn how to build trails and do those things in other areas.
And with the turn of a pedal, the town of Crosby may stay open for another century. For Lakeland News at 10, I'm Annie Cook.
As I mentioned, we are live this evening, and we were planning on having two guests this evening, and one of them wasn't able to get here because she was coming from St. Paul. So we have Emily Rorigan, who is the Brainerd Main Street coordinator, and Emily has agreed to go solo on our program this evening, and we appreciate that, Emily. And welcome to the program. And before we get into specifics about Main Street, tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into this line of work, which I consider to be a challenging job.
Well, I grew up in Duluth, and I always enjoyed going to our local neighborhood center as soon as I could ride my bike, and then to downtown once I was older. And never really thought much more beyond that. Then when I was going to school at McAllister, I found out that you could major in something called urban studies, and I thought, wow, you can study cities? That's fantastic. And as our senior project approached, we decided to do it on main streets in small towns, and why were some main streets thriving and busy and full of life, and others seem to have been ignored by the community and the region. And then we had chosen that project because we didn't think we'd ever be able to get to work on main streets again. So when I saw the advertisement for this position to revitalize Brainerd's downtown, I jumped at it. It seemed just the perfect fit.
And have you been happy with it?
Yeah, it's been terrific. I've been learning new things every day.
And you've been on this job, I think you said 2 years now?
2 years this April.
Well, the other speaker that we were going to have this evening, or guest, was Bonnie McDonald, who was the executive director of the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota. And she was coming from St. Paul, and her little Honda, she didn't think she could make it through the 9 inches of snow. between here and there. So I think she made a good choice by not coming. But you've agreed also to help us understand a little bit about the Preservation Alliance, what it is, what it does, and could you just tell us a little bit about that? What is that and how it connects to Main Streets?
Well, the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota is the only statewide private nonprofit organization advocating for historic preservation in Minnesota. And they work very closely with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is also the founding organization of Main Street programs across the country. And so the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota works to help communities advocate for preserving their historic buildings, their cultural centers. And in the last year or two, they've also started to bring people together to create a statewide coordinating Main Street program. And Main Street's unique in that it focuses on 4 points of revitalizing downtown areas or main streets: promotion, organization, economic restructuring, and design. And we can talk a little bit more about those later, but it's been a very successful program over the last 30 years. They've had over 2,000 communities use it with great success in enlivening their communities, bringing jobs back to them, and reinvesting in their buildings and town centers.
So is there a national organization that in Minnesota is a part of that national organization?
There is a national organization, however, Minnesota is not currently a part of it. That national organization is called the National Main Street Center. They're located in Washington, D.C., and they work directly with states. And the states are what works with local programs, like what we have here in Brainerd or Owatonna has there. And the statewide programs certify the local programs, which is how they are supposed to connect nationally. However, in Minnesota, since we don't have one, the local programs work on their own and try to tap into the resources the National Center provides in terms of articles and trainings. But there are so many resources that communities in states with coordinating programs are able to get in terms of financing and technical help to help them improve their communities.
I was looking at just some of the members of the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, and it's Barnesville, Brainerd, Cannon Falls, Eagle Lake, Red Wing, the Duluth Heritage Preservation, Hastings, Metro Plains Development, the Minnesota Design Team, the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Office. This is an incredible collection of organizations behind this movement. And I suspect that if a community is not involved with it, they're probably not aware of it.
That's very likely true. It's been a very quiet movement in Minnesota. Decades ago, Minnesota had a statewide program, but it got moved around to different state departments and eventually was cut from the state budget. So in the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota's current efforts to bring the statewide program back, they're looking at other ways of funding it so that it won't be sacrificed to state budget cuts like we're going through now.
And I'm guessing that communities could easily say, well, we're in a recession right now, so it's not a good time to be getting involved in something like this. But in reality, it's a process, isn't it? It takes a number of years of planning before anything really probably specifically happens. Would that be fair to say?
Definitely. It would take quite a while of planning, and one of the tenets of the Main Street program is that there is there's a full-time staff or a nearly full-time staff person dedicated to making it work, because what's been discovered through other programs is that if it's only volunteers working on it, it's not sustainable for very long because people just can't do that forever in addition to their regular life.
Well, why should people care about revitalizing Main Street?
Well, how a town is perceived is by outsiders, by visitors, even by the town itself, is by their downtown or their main street, depending on the size of the town. And if that town looks well taken care of, like people have pride in it, then visitors coming to the town will see that, will take notice of it, and they'll want to come there and spend more money there. Businesses that are thinking of relocating often look at how rejuvenated a downtown is, or how interesting it'll be for their employees to be there. And it's a can be a barometer for the economic health of an area. In larger cities like St. Paul or Minneapolis, what they've seen over the years is that if their downtowns aren't doing well, if they have a lot of housing problems, if the buildings aren't being kept up, that pushes people outside of the area, pushes them at first to suburbs like Roseville or Brooklyn Park, and then once those start to get older and maybe the houses aren't being kept up as well, the malls don't look as new, then they build outside of that on the next ring in what were farms. And you continue to go until we have third ring suburbs now in the Twin Cities. And what they notice then is if you have a strong center where people live, where they're doing their shopping, they're visiting with friends, they're bringing their families from out of town to show off, then you don't have those problems. And the problems that were once just in the middle of Minneapolis, you now see in Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, and Roseville of increased crime and other issues that people used to think of as solely urban. So even if someone doesn't live in the center that needs the rejuvenation, they really will benefit from it because what happens in the middle of the city will eventually happen to the rest of the city sooner or later.
And I know you mentioned that this is affecting communities of all sizes, St. Paul to St. Peter. I look at some of our area communities, and I think maybe two communities that probably have not been as impacted as dramatically as others would be perhaps Nisswa, which I think still has a very vibrant downtown. And I think Walker also has a very vibrant downtown, and they don't have the large box stores that have built on the outside edges of those. But I would guess that you have businesses in those communities too that need to be restored or saved. Sometimes it's a matter of saving these buildings, isn't it, that have been there for a long, long time.
Yeah, and if you think about a downtown or a town center, it's really like a house. It needs to be maintained. It needs to have attention taken to it, whether that's in the house's finances to making sure the mortgage gets paid, or that you're fixing the roof, you're mowing the lawn, you're planting flowers in the spring. And you need to do those same types of activities in a downtown. You need to take care of the buildings. You need to make sure that the businesses are having the tools they need to be successful businesses, that they are able to learn and grow and expand when necessary. And if a business is going to close or the business owner wants to retire, are there potential buyers for that business so that the business can remain in the community and be a win-win situation for everyone involved? And those are some of the types of activities that Main Street programs in communities take on. In Brainerd, we're a very young Main Street program, about a year and a half old, and we're working towards being able to do all of those things. But it is a process, and it does take time to educate the people working in the program, the volunteers, and the businesses that they work to help.
I can't imagine that this is an easy task to walk in, probably any time, but specifically with the economy in a downturn that it is now. But what's the approach that you use if you go in? Let's just say there's a store owner in Pequot Lakes, and the person who's working in that area. What's the strategy that you typically would use in these kind of programs to work with the business communities, because they are independent business owners, and I'm certain that they have minds of their own and they have ways of doing things. And I'm sure that if someone were to talk about doing a facelift on their store, it has to have a payback for them. I would imagine it isn't something that they want to be involved with. What's your approach there?
Well, firstly, many of the volunteers as part of the Main Street program in Brainerd are independent business owners or property owners or concerned members in the community who want to see the area improved. And so it takes away one of those hurdles when you have independent business owners talking to each other, talking to their neighbors about what they would like to make out of their business neighborhood of the downtown. And then also, many consumers, many customers, their first impression of a business, of what they see on the outside, is what they use to determine whether or not they're even going to visit the business, over 50%. So
really?
Mm-hmm.
So this is for strangers coming into an area. Say that again.
So if you're driving by a business or walking by businesses, chances are you're going to, whether you know it or not, you're going to be making lots of judgments about what's inside that business based on what the outside of it looks like. And you know, it's a very quick time, but over half of the people make their judgment about whether or not they'll go inside a business based on what the outside looks like.
That's very interesting. I have a list here of, and I don't know if you want to cover some of the communities that are involved with the Main Street program. It's pretty impressive. Maybe I should would you want to mention some of them?
Well, there are over 16 communities that are implementing the Main Street program in one form or another, whether it's been for several years, like in Owatonna, where they're fully implementing the Main Street program. At Owatonna, Main Street is part of their Chamber of Commerce, and they've been doing it longer than Brainerd by quite a few years. And
how long do you think?
5 or 7 years, I can't remember.
Would you want to show some of those slides that we have of Owatonna?
In Owatonna, they have several.
Maybe Tom could pull those up if you could for us, Tom.
They have several before and after slides.
So we're looking here at Ace Hardware, and this would be a before.
This is a before picture in Owatonna, and soon we'll be seeing the after picture.
There it is. Wow, that's just, and you said basically it's not a structural change as much as it is mostly a kind of a physical change of the, they're here, they put awnings and they've done new windows. And this is a real estate office that we're looking at. This is the before picture. And again, I think you'll look and see it's more of just a physical appearance of the front end. Again, that's the same real estate office, but it really looks quite different.
And in Owatonna, they followed some guidelines that the community developed to use in rehabilitating and doing the facade improvements to these buildings. In Brainerd, we're working on building design guidelines that will be unique to Brainerd, while also improving the unique historic and architectural characteristics of the building.
And we're looking at another before picture here, Owatonna Heating and Cooling. Here's the after picture. And as we're looking at these, I might just run by some of the other communities in case people would be interested in contacting these communities. There's Owatonna Shoe. Cannon Falls, Callaway, Duluth, Eagle Lake, Gaylord, Hastings, Le Sueur, Henderson, Little Falls, Mankato, Mapleton, New Ulm, Northfield, Owatonna, as we shown here. St. Paul, Red Wing, Slayton, Sleepy Eye, Waseca, and Winona. Those are the communities that are currently involved in the Main Street program. Where does the money come from for these kinds of activities?
Well, it's different in every community. In Brainerd, the program, basic program expenses are primarily funded through the city's Economic Development Authority, or EDA, and any special projects that are completed, such as events like the Women's Walkabout, or we replanted an area in a parking lot in the downtown.